So let's say you have a rate of 60%. You get 100 new clients every month for 12 months, which is not difficult. We've done it. You can do it too. It's not hard. If you retained even 10% more, so going from 60 to 70, that's an extra $50,400 every single year. And just double that when you're at 80, triple that when you're at 30, right? So we're talking an extra $50,000 to $150,000 every single year without having to spend money on marketing, without having to, go purchase clients.
Good deal. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Automated Barbershop Podcast. Of course, I'm your co-host, Kaleb Rosenberg, joined by Owen Granger. If you guys are new here, just real quick, obviously we're in the marketing space. We've been in the marketing space for the last few years, and we ended up coming across, some barbershops, some local guys that really needed help with marketing. And that's why we started this podcast, is because we started a software to help with that at a reasonable cost. And now we are actually talking about what we're doing, what we're seeing in the barber industry as far as marketing and systems and processes, client retention, which is actually our topic for today that we kind of alluded to last week. And so we're kind of just going to dive right in. Owen and I keep things pretty casual here, so hopefully you guys can relate to us. But I'll kind of, since this was, some things that you mentioned back in our conversation earlier today, as far as some stats and things like that, I'll just kind of let you take it away as far as what you're seeing on the client retention side.
Yeah. Most barbershop owners think they have a marketing problem or a client problem or a barber problem for that matter, when it's truly a client retention problem. They're turning away from client retention and thinking, how can I get more clients through the door, when you're not focusing on the clients you have already had walk through your door, which it's like you're just completely missing the boat on how you can maximize revenue for the least amount of money. Because we've ran, campaigns, and we've done a lot of, whether it's SEO, digital presence, as I mentioned, meta ad campaigns for barbershops. And those are expensive, especially for what most barbershops are making every single month. And so instead of putting up a $1,500, $2,000 ad budget month after month after month to generate 200 or 300 new clients coming through your door, if you focus on what's happening inside the barbershop, right, to keep an extra 10 to 20% of customers coming back, that's how you can make an extra 50 to 100 grand a year without really spending any money, right? So it's like, I just did the numbers on this before we hopped on because I had seen it before, but I wanted to confirm it, right? Let's say you get 100 new clients every month for 12 months. Most barbershops, I'll be generous and say that they retain 60%. Most barbershops are probably retaining more to 40 to 50, but we'll be generous and say 60, because that's kind of like a service business standard, right? Of 60% most of the time they retain. So let's say you have a rate of 60%. You get 100 new clients every month for 12 months, which is not difficult. We've done it. You can do it too. It's not hard. If you retained even 10% more, so going from 60 to 70, that's an extra $50,400 every single year. And just double that when you're at 80, triple that when you're at 30, right? So we're talking an extra $50,000 to $150,000 every single year without having to spend money on marketing, without having to, go purchase clients, right? And that to me is the thing that's, now some people are starting to talk about it, right? But it's one of those things in the barber industry, in the barbershop industry, where it's like, no, some people just don't come back. And they don't actually look into, well, why don't they come back? And that's something that we've talked about a ton, right? Like the reasons why they're not coming back.
Yeah, there's a lot of those when it comes to folks not coming back to your shop. And I think part of the issue, of course, myself being a lot on back end systems and being a huge believer and advocate for systems and processes, a lot of guys lack that from what we've seen, especially on the back end side where,
The large
are
majority
you,
do.
you know what I
The
mean? Like,
large majority lack that.
are you sending a message to them to ask them how their experience was? Are you sending a message to request a review? Are you, reminding them if it's been 30 days, you have a system in place that's messaging them or emailing them and say, hey, we haven't seen you in a while. Why not book your next cut? And then if it's, having a system where even more advanced, maybe it's been 3 months, maybe it's been 4 months. Hey, notice you haven't gotten a cut with us in quite some time. We miss you over here at XYZ shop, or XYZ cuts or XYZ fades. Why not, come in and we'll give you 10% off. Or instead of $50 cuts, we'll get you in at 40 or 35 or whatever your price point is. And we'll go into a pricing episode at some point because I think a lot of guys have room to grow on the pricing side as well, where they're not kind of like stacking their pricing in a sense.
Yeah.
And so that's my biggest thing as far as like retention goes, is the lack of back end items, including systems, processes, AI, whatever you might have, in order to capture that retention. You know what I mean?
Oh, 1,000%. And we've talked to barbershop owners, and this is a theme you're going to hear throughout just about every episode, right?
Yeah.
Where barbershop owners, and it's not just you guys. It happens in every single niche, so don't feel bad. And I'm not trying to single you out, but we're a barbershop growth podcast. So we're talking about barbershop owners.
Yeah.
And so if you are doing the same thing that 80%, 90% of the shops that are in your, let's say, service area are doing, that's why you're not making money. Because there's probably 1 to 3 shops in most large cities. Now, granted, if you're talking about like a major metro area, it's going to be more, right? But I'm in a town of 120-ish thousand people, right? I know for a fact that there are 3 barbershops that are pushing crazy revenue. And when I say crazy revenue, I'm saying like 500K a year plus, right? You don't just fall into that. And we have probably 9 to 10 other barbershops in the city limits that are making in the range of, let's say, 90, no, probably not 90, like 100 to 180 a year, maybe 200, right? And so a big part of that is systems, processes, and we're going to hit on systems and processes constantly because they're so important. But let's spin it, right? Because most of you guys don't have that background knowledge like we do in systems, processes, operations, all that shit. So what can you do starting tomorrow to fix your client retention problem? The biggest reason why people don't come back is because they are dissatisfied with the experience.
Yeah.
Not the haircut. Now, granted, sometimes a barber fucks up a haircut, right?
Yeah.
It happens. Not a problem, right? It's part of the game.
Yeah.
Stuff happens. But the main reason people do not come back is because they didn't enjoy the experience, or there wasn't an experience at all.
Yeah. That's a big piece.
Right? And so, like, what goes into an experience? And we're going to do a full episode, and hopefully with one of our clients talking about experience, because they do a kick-ass job at it. But in just a shorter kind of snippet, is there drama in the shop? Because people feel that heavily. Are your barbers carrying around egos? We all know that there's a lot of barbers that think they're the greatest thing to ever have, a pair of clippers in their hand, which they're not. what's the walk-in situation like? Are your barbers avoiding walk-ins because maybe they're 10, 15 bucks cheaper than their book cut prices? Because that happens too. Um, is there a space for someone to actually have a conversation and feel like they're talking to a real person? Like that's potentially the biggest one for me because we hear it constantly, and I know a lot of barbershop owners say this almost as a joke or just like a saying, but going to the barbershop is therapy for men, right? I know every single person that's listening to this has heard that. And it's very true to an extent. But the same barbershop owners that say that don't give that space to their clients, or their barbers don't give that space to their clients, right? Where a lot of this comes back to ego, where it's like there's a lot of barbers, especially in booth rent shops, that feel like they're the CEO, they're the big bad entrepreneur, you know, I'm the big hustler. And it's like, bro, you are providing a service. Someone is trading you money to get a service.
Yeah.
And the whole, hey, I'm cool as shit doesn't really work
Yeah.
because people aren't going to worship you at your feet type thing.
Yeah.
So that's a huge thing that goes into experience, and that goes into building the right team, building the right culture. What's the standard of the barbershop, right? What will we not only expect, but accept at a baseline level? And what are things that are absolutely not tolerated? And so you got to start thinking about these things because that's why, let's say, 40 to 60% of the people that come in one time don't come back.
Yeah.
So that's the big thing about experience, right? It's highly important because, as I said last episode, and what I will say most every episode is, you can get a great fade most places. You can get lined up great at most places. Maybe not me, right? But it's like you can get a great haircut just about anywhere,
Yeah.
right? And so on the day to day, what you and your barbers need to do is focus on how can we deliver the greatest experience to every client, because that tied in with some of this, systems, processes, operational stuff that we're going to talk about in just a second. Tying those two together is how you retain 80% of your first time customers. Because truly the two big metrics for barbershops that we've seen is customer retention and lifetime customer value. It's such a low price point per visit, right? That bringing in 100 new customers and having 60 people only come once in a month, it's not a big, mover of the needle.
Yeah.
But let's say you flip that to 80, 90 people stay and continue to stay, and they're coming in twice a month for 3, 4, 5, 10 years. That's true growth, because your lifetime customer value is so much higher than any barbershop in the area. So that's kind of my big spiel on like client experience, why it's so important. And we're going to do probably a bit of a longer episode, like I said, hopefully with one of our clients going into that because they do it so well. But let's jump into some of the systems, processes, and operations that guys don't know are out there. Because let's be honest, they're cheap, they're pretty easy to implement, and they're all automated. And so those things are it's it's truly laziness if you don't have them in your shop,
Yeah.
right? So let's like I want to hear from you because you are our systems and like ops guy. So on your end, what are some of the biggest things that these owners need to have in their shops going forward? Like let's say in the next like 1 to 3 months, if they're really wanting to focus on retaining more clients.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, the biggest thing that I see is some type of automated platform Of course, we have ours that does
Mhm.
amongst, several other items, but there are platforms that you can just get super cheap. I think there's ones out there. I can't recommend any to you because I don't look into them like that. But
Yeah, because
there's
we have them all in ours. That's why
right,
we don't look into them.
exactly. So I would say like I've seen there's certain like softwares that can automate review requests. So like
Mhm.
after a service, it might actually be native inside of typically is like your booking system or your POS. So if you have Vagaro, Booksy, Barberly, things like that, a lot of them have that. But just turning that feature on in itself of leaving a review will obviously kind of be, a double-edged sword because in the positive note, because you're getting more reviews to boost your search presence, but at the same time, and your authority in the market, but you're also getting people to buy into your shop. I think that's the biggest thing is that guys don't know how to get the
Getting them to
customer.
vocalize it.
Yeah, like you need to get the person like me as a new client to your barbershop, as a new customer. You need to get me to buy into like why am I coming here? Because to Owen's point, I can go find another shop or another barber on Instagram that does incredible fades, maybe arguably, better because I've definitely been to shops where I got great haircuts, but I just didn't like the experience. So I left it as like a necessity essentially. Like if my barber's busy, like and I
Mhm.
need it, or I'm going to an event or whatever the case might be, then I'll go to this other shop, if it's convenient. But I think the review request is probably the biggest one. The second piece being, and again, there's easy softwares. If you don't want to go like full blast on kind of getting a lot of automations and stuff like that built out, if I had to name kind of two or three, it'd be that. Um, Second one I'd say is the follow ups. I think if you can't do anything else except two things, asking for reviews with automation, not you asking for reviews. I mean, of course, if we're in the shop and they're in the chair, hey, if you wouldn't mind, if you like the experience, feel free to throw me a review on Google. I'm just, trying to get my name out there, my shop's name out there, and help other people get good
Mhm.
haircuts. Right? If they're telling you, oh man, it's great, love this, blah blah blah, whatever. So review request one, but two, the follow ups. And I'm not saying you have to do something super advanced. There's probably in some of these native systems. I don't really personally look into them that deep as far as the automations go when it's like Vagaro, Booksy, things like that, because again, our software and our platform does that. And so it's a lot easier for us to manage all that and do a lot more. But if you can only do two things, review requests, and then find a way to get even one text message. Like if you can have something where you can, after 30 days, and
Mhm.
if you have to do it by hand, honestly, I really don't care if you have to do it
Yeah.
by hand or by, just keeping people in like a spreadsheet. Like I would prefer you have a spreadsheet than nothing at all, which is going to lead me to my next point. But I would say if you can just get a text message or email to somebody after 30 days that they had a
Yep.
haircut, because most people's hair, especially like mine, and you guys know, like black people our hair grows fast. At least mine does. And so if I'm really on it, I need it every 2 weeks. So after 30
Yep.
days, I'm really needing it. So and maybe you
Yeah.
don't want to do 30 days. You
And
can do
I've
60
seen that
days.
on you, and it's
Yeah,
not
bro.
pretty.
It gets bad. It gets really bad. So like I would say 30 or 60 days. However, you have to send a message through a platform, or if you have to do a spreadsheet, so be
Mhm.
it. Do you want to keep your clients coming back to you and really establish these relationships? Because some people forget, especially if
Yeah.
you haven't developed that connection with somebody. It also, you have to think the other way that it plays into client retention is it shows that your barber actually is paying attention to you. You're not just another number on their client list.
That's a great point.
That's why I stayed
That
with mine since I was 12 until I
that's such a
moved.
good point. And like I want to hit on the follow-up stuff. Because so it's a bit of a well, before I go into that, in the Great Clips booking app, and we're going to talk about Great Clips a lot in this podcast just because they made $2 billion last year and they're stealing a bunch of clients from you guys. Like, just to be very frank about it, they're doing a lot better than most independent barbershops, and there's a reason why they made 2 bill last year. Um, in their app, the haircut reminder, which is basically what we're saying, right? Like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, for that first follow-up is basically just a haircut reminder saying, hey, we know you're busy, come book, do whatever. That's a beta function. And if you don't know what a beta function is, it means it's like very early in like the testing phase where they release it to the public just to work out the bugs. And it's been in a beta function for a long time, like at least a year. And so I personally know of a few barbershop owners who are really on top of their shit that have it set up where I believe how a lot of guys have it set up if they're not doing it natively through a system. Because if I'm not mistaken, like Vagaro, Booksy, Square, Barberly, all those places don't give you this option. At least at the time of this posting. They're pulling their client lists out and using a CRM like Go High Level, which is what our software is built on, to send those messages. But I want to caution you guys, right? Because it's not a hey, if they haven't been in 2 weeks, we're giving them a 10% discount or a 15% discount. Because I know where a lot of guys' minds go, where it's like, hey, that's a very easy way to get people to come back. But if that's your process, you're training your clients not to book an appointment until they get the email or text with the discount code. And so how I like to have it set up is, let's say 2 or 3 weeks, whatever is common for your shop, right? Figure out of your diehard clients, of your strong core, are they booking every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every month? Figure that out.
Yeah.
And then that's when your first message is sent. So let's just go with 2 weeks for the example. 14 days from their last cut. Hey, notice we haven't seen you in the shop. Here's the link to book. Excited to see it come in. Super simple, 2 to 3 sentences at most, right? It's truly a reminder, because I'm one of those guys. I got dog shit hair, right? Like, let's just be factual about it. And so I've had this hairline since I was 2 years old. And so there's times I do forget to get a haircut. Like, I can't remember the last time I got it. Was it 3 weeks ago? Was it a little bit longer? And then I look at myself in the mirror. I'm like, Jesus Christ, man, go get a haircut. And like, that's where the reminder function serves the best. Send it out. If they don't come in, they don't come in. You're not bombarding them, begging them to come in, because that comes off as desperate, that you need clients. And that's a whole nother kind of sales psyche situation that you don't want to get yourself into.
Yeah.
So you send that 2-week message out. Let's say 6 weeks, they still haven't come in. That's when we send the, hey, notice you haven't been in a while. It's been, a month or a month and a half or so. Here's our booking link in case you forgot where to book us at. Your last, haircut was with insert barber name.
Yep.
Something like that, right? Where it's like, hey, here is this person's direct booking link. If you enjoyed your haircut, book with him again. Him or her. Don't want to be sexist. To our lady barbers out there. But when we get to that 3-4 month range, right? Because most people will not be waiting for a discount code for 4 months in between haircuts, right? That's where that something happened in that during their last haircut that made them not want to come back. Whatever it was, right? Whatever. It doesn't really matter. But at that point, either they moved, they died, or they didn't like their experience.
Yeah.
So that's when we drop the 10-15% discount. Because you can't really train people into that, because most people that care how they look aren't waiting that long.
Yeah.
And so that's when we drop the discount, because we're trying to pull someone out of a different shop and bring them back to yours. And so that's how we like to have it set up. And there is a period of time, and it's probably after that 3-month mark, right? And now, granted, if you're in a college town, this is a little bit different. So just keep that in mind, because I know there's a lot of shops in college towns, and just like when people are on campus versus when they're off campus, it's a little bit different. But let's say you're not in a college town. At that 3-month mark, it's not really worth it to continue to send them messages. Sure, you can.
Yeah.
Like, let's say, like your third message is 3 months out. You can send them something at 6 months. I wouldn't send them anything longer than 6 months they haven't been in the shop. Because at that point, they've most likely at least gotten 6 haircuts from the time that you last saw them. So that's kind of how we like to have it set up. It's super basic. And honestly, Kaleb, it wouldn't be a bad idea of, making a video and like showing on Zapier,
Yeah.
which is like a kind of like a third-party automation platform where you're not internally in a system, but it builds into other systems on like how to do this.
Yeah.
Because
I have some
like,
ideas on that.
yeah, because so many guys are leaving that on the table where it's like, well, I don't know how to do it, and I don't have the time to sit down and send the manual messages.
Yeah.
But that's how we like to set up the follow-ups, because it's a real set it and forget it thing where you don't even have to push someone into a funnel, push someone into, like the automation. It just goes off the last like date of their last visit within your booking system.
Yeah.
And so, and this is something that I wanted to hit on too, because it does play a role in client retention, but your clients don't know about it. It's something internally. Um, Stop skimping on your booking system.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much out there for you to capitalize on once you move away from Booksy. Once you move away from like basic tier levels of Vagaro, Square, Barbely, where we tell people to use Vagaro, right? Because there are specific things that you can add into Vagaro where not only can you pull a bunch of numbers, but it makes client retention so much easier because it interacts with third-party systems where a lot of the other booking platforms do not. And so you have to think about client retention in kind of 3 ways: client experience,
Yep.
systems and processes, like what's your actual backend that's touching the client, whether it's, you know, like automated review requests, haircut reminders / follow-ups, um, you know, like I guess like email lists if you sell like products or merch or whatever, something like that. Stuff along those lines where they're actually touching the client. And then the third, this is something nobody talks about, is your internal systems that don't touch a client, but make everything else easier,
Yeah.
that increases the experience level. Whether that's having the personalized app, and now granted they do touch that, so that's probably a second, area for that. But being able to pull the data out of your booking system into a CRM,
Yep.
being able to use Zapier or something along those lines, right? And it's those things where it's like using Booksy, and I know a bunch of guys use Booksy because it's the cheapest option out there and it works. I'm not saying it doesn't work. It's the cheapest option out there, but they also sell your data to other people, so be aware of that. But instead of spending $20 a month with Booksy, right? Spend $200 a month with Vagaro, because you will make that money back 10, 20, 30 fold.
Yeah. It
Solely
streamlines
based.
your business and everything.
Yes, exactly. And so, like, focusing on one of these things is not going to get you to that extra 50 grand a month. Like, I'm
Yeah.
just going to be dead ass with you. There's no one plug or play switch that you can flip that's going to automatically just drop an extra 50 grand in your business. But when you start implementing and caring about the experience, your client facing systems and processes, your internal operation systems and processes, that's where you see the 50, 70, 100 grand increase. And like, I forget, I think that like all the stuff that we recommend in Vigaro is about 200 a month, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, somewhere in that ballpark. There's some extras, so you could probably get by on a little bit less, but yeah,
But
whether it's that
that's
or
2,400 a year, bro. That's
yeah,
$2,400 a year. And if you do everything else correctly, it's at minimum a 50 grand increase.
yeah, which
And
is
so,
yeah,
like, I get it. If you're only making 10 grand a month, it's like, man, $200 and, an extra 15 or 20 a head,
yeah,
man, that's kind of expensive. But it's like, you're a business owner. Invest into the systems and processes that will make your business money. Because by doing that, you can automate things happen in the background, and then that allows you to focus almost entirely on client experience,
yep,
which is what day in, day out brings people back to your shop. E- Everything else is just kind of like almost like a stabilizing framework. I almost think of it as, right?
yep,
It's like almost like a skeleton foundation, which it's awesome. If you only have that stuff, it will help. But it's when you couple a great client experience with that,
yeah,
that's where you see the massive jumps in revenue. And you didn't spend 1,500 a month, 2 grand in ads, right? You're not constantly overwhelmed by all the new clients coming in and then being like, where the hell are they? And then you have to
yep,
go out and spend that same amount of money to get the exact same result. And so, like, that's why client retention is so important. It's
yep,
because it allows you to consistently make more money without spending money to get new clients. And then you're bringing them into a system where they stay.
yeah,
And
which is
that's the
key.
sustainable growth, right?
Yeah,
Like, that's how you grow. It's not because granted, I love Facebook ads. I've wrote some kick-ass Facebook
right,
ad campaigns for barbershops. Less than $3 cost per booking.
yeah,
But guess what? I would tell you don't run this if you don't have these systems in place.
yeah,
It's not
literally,
worth it.
yeah,
It's
it's
not
not,
worth it.
yeah, it's definitely not worth it. And to kind of give some extra little, I guess, tips for guys when it comes to, there was kind of like there was one point when we were talking about follow ups. One thing on the automations, that you guys can really think about too, or guys can really implement is, now this is a little bit advanced, obviously. So this is something that we're implementing in our system as of very recent, and so we're going to be rolling this out to guys fairly soon here. But having the ability in the follow up to message the person based off of the time, like Owen mentioned, not only the time and the date, but the person. So if
Mm,
John, let's say, had a haircut, he had a cut with, let's just say, our guy Jerry, for example, or we'll just say Daniel, just for this purpose. So Daniel
yeah,
cut John's hair. 30 days later, we sent John a message, and let's say it was Wednesday at 1 o'clock. John's going to get a message 30 days later from Daniel. Hey, John, it's Daniel. Last time you were in the shop, it was a Wednesday around like 1 o'clock. I haven't seen you in the last couple of weeks. Would this Wednesday at 1 be a good time for you again? Or
yeah,
something like that takes it
dude,
to, again, I'm not saying to go out and try to get as crazy as possible. A lot of folks need to just get something rolling. But
yep.
once you have a base foundation, again, we have a base foundation. So we're starting to experiment with some very, very advanced things like that,
Next
being able
level
to,
shit.
like conditional logic
Yeah,
type things. And so you're
yep,
able to really stick in that person's mind, like, oh, wow, Daniel remembered the time and the day. If even then, if they don't think that they remembered, they see that you looked at something or you took the extra time to see, okay, John booked at this time and this day. I wonder if that's good for him right now because he hasn't been in a while. So that's
yeah.
one thing that you can do on a more advanced level. And again, we're starting to really test that out for our folks as well. But
And
I
that can
want to
be
say,
all automated. I want to make
yeah,
that clear.
very much.
That's
Yeah,
not that's not one of your barbers sitting down in the middle of the day
exactly.
being like, "Hey, when was this guy?" This is all automated. It all happens in the
Yeah.
background.
Good point. Yeah. All the things that we talk about, again, we're very big systems automations using AI. That's why we have a platform for guys that we've
Mhm.
extensively built out and we will continue to improve. like Owen mentioned, based off the GHL platform. But GHL in itself is not going to get you where you need to be. You are going to need to build some pretty extensive automations and continuously improve and integrate and update. And that's the benefit of guys choosing us. But one thing I want to kind of pivot to is this whole pod, because we'll wrap this up here in just a minute. But this whole thing bases upon the fact that you are tracking your metrics to begin with. So many of you guys, how are you supposed to track something? Like guys will come to us and talking about, yeah, we just can't get people to stay. Okay, what's your metric for that? Well, I have no idea. Or we look at their back end and there's nothing to track a bunch of things in general, but how are you tracking people not coming back, or when's the last time someone booked? If you're not tracking that, all of this can go out the window. You first need to start with tracking the data to figure out what you can improve, and then figuring out, like, we're not trying to make these insane jumps, right? Owen's talking about not an extra 50 or 100 grand a month, talking about a year. So you need to be able to look, okay, our client retention right now, let's just say, is 60%. How can we get to 62%? How can we get to 64.5%? Because that over time, as you keep adding a percent or two over time, that's what's going to kind of have that compound growth effect. So that's like the biggest point that I'm gonna just mention on that, just so guys can understand how important that the first step is tracking this information, or tracking these data points.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because so many barbershop owners cannot tell us their like customer retention rate. They just can't. And I know so many people think that like the monthly revenue number is so important, and that's the only thing that matters. And it's like, if that number looks nice, you don't care about anything else. And it's like, that's the reason why you're a $200,000 a year barbershop and not a $800,000, $900,000, $1 million a year barbershop. Because it's like, once this foundation is set and you're actually, utilizing all three of the areas of kind of like a customer retention plan, right? Like client experience, internal systems, operations and processes, and then client facing systems, operations and processes. It's like, yes, this alone might only add 50K, like 100K a year. But, and as I mentioned earlier, customer lifetime value, all that shit matters a lot. So that's when you run the paid advertisements. That's when you do everything else to feed the system. But the system cannot work and will never work if you're not tracking the data. And so I get it. A lot of you guys don't come from a business background. You don't come from the background that we come from. We understand it. That's why we built Automated Barbershop, right? And so even if you don't come to us, I implore you, just start tracking the data. Figure out whatever you have to do to track the data, because it gives you, because if you're not tracking it, you're blind. You are flying blind. And that's why you have variable revenue. That's why your barbers are like, it's the crux of so many problems. So if you take away one thing and want to start doing one thing, track the data. Because once you have the data, then you know what to fix. If you don't, you're just guessing, and guessing is not a good business plan or a good marketing plan or a good growth plan, whatever it is. If you're making assumptions, you're saying, I know and I'm smarter than the concrete factual data that is accessible to me, but I'm too lazy to put the few hours in to set up the actual tracking of that. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's so important. And we will absolutely be diving in to, like, one, how to track it, but also what you should be tracking. And some kind of like baseline numbers in terms of what you should be hitting for a healthy shop, right? Instead of, because, I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole because we're already at 38 minutes, but like customer retention and like client experience should be your Bible. day in, day out. It just has to be if you want to grow your barbershop.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. That's a good episode. But as always, we got some cool links down below on whether you're in one of the podcast apps or if you're on our YouTube watching this as a kind of video format. We got some cool links for you guys, so check those out. If you guys do need help with this, feel free to check out some of those cool links. We're going to be posting a lot more YouTube content as well. I'm going to be going through systems. Owen will go through marketing. Daniel will be doing stuff on like business development. So
all that.
Yeah.
All that fun stuff.
Got a lot of good stuff for you guys coming along. So appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll see you guys next week.